What is up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? It's Monday, and that means it's time for the Monday morning conversation. I'm excited to have Brian Batko of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette joining me today. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Yeah, a holiday Monday too.
Yeah.
So I guess that's even a little bit of a bonus. So yeah, I'm not doing my chat on the Post Gazette website today in case any of the listeners like to frequent that because I will be enjoying Memorial Day with the fam.
Yeah, when I set this up, I totally forgot that Monday was a holiday. And I was like, well, it's still going to be a good interview. So people will check it out maybe on Tuesday, but that's fine. We're going to talk about all things Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh Steelers. And the reason why I said all things Pittsburgh is the fact that, well, it's just announced last week that the city of Pittsburgh will host the 2026 NFL draft. I just want to ask your initial reaction, Brian, when you heard that, which they've been trying to get the draft for a long time. What
Yeah.
was your initial reaction?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised, like you said. I mean, this has kind of been a poorly kept secret. I think going back a year or two now, it seemed like they
Yeah.
were targeting 2026 as the year to land it. And yes, clearly the interest, the mutual interest between the city and the league dates back even further than that. So I mean, it's such an obvious fit with how much this city loves football. I mean, they've turned out for the Steelers draft parties with those rookies, and I'm sure it won't be any different for filling the streets of the North Shore for the NFL draft for the real thing for all 32 teams. It'll be great for Pittsburgh. I think it'll be a cool spectacle for the NFL. I think any traveling fans who've maybe never been here or just debating on whether they want to come here for that trip, would have a great time. Me personally, I'm not somebody who really has much of a desire to go to the draft. Like I love the draft. I love covering it. I love
Yeah.
watching it, seeing where players land, seeing how teams, navigate those waters. And, I write and talk about it a ton in the months leading up to it. It's just not like a live viewership event for me.
Right.
I get it. If you're gonna be watching it and paying attention to it anyway, why not throw on your jersey, have some beers with your buddies, and use it as an excuse to just sort of go hang out with like-minded people. But for me, it's a step below actually going to a stadium or an arena to watch a game. That to me is where I would sort of draw the line. So I don't think you'll see me rubbing shoulders on Art Rooney Avenue or anything like that. But obviously, it is huge news for the city.
Hey, you'll probably be in the South Side doing the normal shtick at the complex, I'm
Yeah,
sure. But let me ask.
that'll be interesting. Yeah, because people always ask me around draft time, like, "Oh, are you going to the draft?" And I'm like, "No, there's really no. As a beat writer, there's no reason to be where the draft is hosted. I mean, we saw this past year, only I think 13 or 14 guys even went to Detroit for it. So
Yeah.
fewer and fewer prospects are even going to be there live. And from what I've heard, if your team takes somebody who's there, you get like 1 or 2 minutes with them, and then they're shipped off, and they're doing the conference calls to those of us who are back at headquarters in the
Yeah.
city and talking to them that way. So yeah, it's much more beneficial to be, at your team's facility where the decision makers, the GMs, the coaches, the assistants are anyway.
You said that it's a good fit. And this, I do not expect you to know the infrastructure of the city, but I've been to Pittsburgh numerous times, grew up in Wheeling. We went to the Three River Stadium all the time. And now I've been to PNC Park, Heinz Field, now Acrisure Stadium. I cannot wrap my head around where the hell they're going to put all these people. And I know that Art Rooney, that it's going to be, I believe, the lot across from Stage AE. I mean, you saw in Detroit this past draft. I mean, there were people everywhere. That North Shore, is it going to be able to withstand everyone? Where the hell are they going to put everybody?
I think it's going to be a little disjointed. It'll probably be a little fragmented because there's just going to have to be streets closed down and
Yeah.
throngs of people probably wrapping around various corners and yeah, spilling over into parking lots and stuff. But I think to put this bid together between the Steelers and the city and the Visit Pittsburgh tourism agency, I think there had to be a lot of work done on the front end of where do we pitch hosting this. We have Point State Park, obviously, which would
Right.
be cool for the scenery and the spectacle, and yeah, you probably could put a whole bunch of people in there as you do for various events every year. But I'm sure the Steelers want to be heavily involved and have their logo everywhere and their stadium be a fixture of this weekend. So they, maybe there had to be some give and take there. It seems like, the Detroit and Philly and Kansas City areas where they've staged it have been more Point Park-esque, but obviously it's going to be, more of a Steelers run operation in 2026. Hey, the good news, Jeff, they've got two years to figure out all the details of it. But yes, they need to have the blueprint pretty well hammered out to even land this decision from the league.
You're right. You're right. Let's talk about the actual Steelers, who were back at work last week with week 1 of phase 3 of organized team activities wrapping up. And it happens every year, Brian. You see it on social media, I'm sure, and you see it with the aggregators and the way that they regurgitate some of these reports. And the overreaction is real, right? And I think it's natural because the fan base is so rabid. They just want to get their hands, their teeth, the eyeballs on something that's tangible that they can see and they can somehow digest. I want to ask you, though, where do you see the value in OTAs? You're there watching. I know you can only share so much as it pertains to like individual drills and stuff like that, but what can be gleaned from football and shorts, aka OTA / mandatory minicamp, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just Pittsburgh. I was just seeing something out of Philly the other day that, hey, 10 overreactions from Eagles OTAs. Kenny Pickett's looking sharper than Jalen Hurts. And yeah, I mean, you'll have that from all 32 teams in every market in the league because yes, the ongoing churn of the NFL calendar never stops. People are always hungry for any information. As far as what I'm gleaning a lot of the times in these settings is, it is football in shorts. So I'm looking at the physical statures of guys. I mean, yes, you can see on a piece of paper, hey, this dude's 5'10", this dude's 6'6" with 35-inch arms. But then when you see him in person, it's kind of like, wow, that is a physically impressive human being. Like the guy that stood out to me the most on Thursday was Jeremiah Moon, an outside linebacker whom the Steelers claimed from the Ravens this offseason. That Baltimore waived him, and he hasn't done much of anything in the NFL. He was undrafted after like 5 or 6 years in college, but he's 6'5", 240, and he's got arms longer than Broderick Jones. So I mean, he's kind of a freak of nature. I mean, we'll see if he can actually play football when he gets his opportunity, but you see that. You see somebody like Roman Wilson who, man, at rookie minicamp, him coming in, that's one thing. And you see him next to, 88 other pro football players. And yeah, the size is going to be a challenge for him at this level. I mean, he might have to get a little bigger, a little bit stronger to compete as a wide receiver, especially if he wants to come in here and make an instant impact as a number 2 right away. So, I mean, those are things that I'm gleaning on the field, off the field. How are guys sort of maneuvering around the locker room, especially with so many new faces, new veterans coming in, new rookies coming in? What are sort of the players that people are gravitating towards? So it's part of it. It's just one big grain of salt disclaimer for basically everything that you're getting out of this time of year.
The players and the way they perform on a practice field with shorts on is not really anything to write home about. I do find it interesting, though, and I want to get your take on this. There are a lot of new Steelers coaches on staff this year, whether you're talking about Arthur Smith all the way down to a new wide receivers coach. Some other position coaches are being added, new quarterbacks coach. Have you seen anything different just from like, hey, the way that they're doing things now doesn't mean it's better. We're not here to bash the last regime. We've done that enough. But are they doing anything different that you've seen so far?
I've seen a lot of energy, honestly. I mean, Arthur Smith, yes. I mean, he's coming in here with something to prove, of course. And I think it's just natural, too, that first year as an offensive coordinator, play caller, or really any assistant, you probably need to find a little bit different gear to connect with these guys than when you're in your second, third, or fourth year. I mean, Matt Canada last year was his 3rd season in that role and, 4th on staff. So he knew everybody and probably wasn't that same natural, kick and hop in your step, but Smith has it. And who really has it are a couple of the new offensive position coaches under him. The quarterbacks coach, Tom Arth, is, really motoring around out there and getting active with these guys, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. And he's still a relatively young guy who played quarterback in the league not too long ago. So he's in great shape. And I mean, you probably have to match the energy of a Russell Wilson. I mean, his work ethic, whether it's how genuine or authentic you think it is or not. I mean, he's going to be out there trying to raise the bar for teammates, especially at this point in his career. And then the new receivers coach, Zach Azzani, I mean, he's got a very upbeat, in-your-face style as well. Will guys take to that, especially a George Pickens? I don't know, but he's somebody who's kind of known for being hyper out there on the field, and I've seen that thus far in OTAs. Maybe they want that from their offensive assistant coaches because this unit has been in a rut for a couple years.
It did seem like they wanted an injection of something, and maybe it was energy, and maybe it was for the position. Mike Tomlin always says this guy's a teacher. Like, he loves people that can teach the game, but the motivation aspect has to be there too. I'm assuming that Mike Tomlin is just Mike Tomlin. Nothing has changed with
Yes.
him. He's
Yeah.
the same Mike Tomlin.
Not seeing any changes in him. I mean, this would be my sixth season on the beat, and I think it's been pretty steady from him, whether he had future Hall of Famer at quarterback or a rookie first round pick, or in this case now the delicate balance of Wilson, Fields, and that dynamic. So yeah, I mean, he'll continue to ramp it up. He'll be barking out instructions and stuff even louder once we get to training camp. But yeah, not seeing any real noticeable difference in Tomlin. He seems as driven as ever, and that's not just coach speak when he says that. You can actually witness it out on the practice field.
Steady Eddie. Now, I do have to ask a question about last week. The Steelers had the flag football experience at Acrisure Stadium, and a lot of alumni were in. What was I know some of them were at practice. I think I saw Troy Polamalu, Bryant McFadden, Ike Taylor. What was the interaction like with current players to these alumni? Was there much? I could only imagine that someone like Troy Fautanu, who grew up idolizing Troy Polamalu, if he's never met him before and actually got the opportunity, were you able to see any of that? And if so, what were those interactions like?
I don't know how much there was, because I think a lot of those alumni were, they were on the sideline for practice. Obviously, the current players are out there working for a couple hours. And, by the time OTA session ended, I think a lot of the alumni were getting ready to head to Acrisure Stadium for Troy Polamalu's event. But yeah, I mean, they did bring the draft picks and some of the other rookies to the stadium for that celebrity flag football game that Polamalu organized to benefit the Neighborhood Resilience Project here in Pittsburgh. And yeah, I mean, Roman Wilson was really into it on the sideline. I don't think he grew up a Steelers fan or anything, but I think he's just kind of trying to get acclimated to his new surroundings and figure, while you're there, hey, this is the guy. When's the last time he's lost a football game? So, I mean, he was on the black team, or not on it, but he was on their sideline. And I did notice him really enjoying himself. And yeah, Troy Fautanu got to meet Troy Polamalu. Not the first time. He told that story on draft night about how the USC coach back in the day, Clay Helton, arranged for him to visit when Polamalu was there. He still didn't pick the Trojans, but that was a memorable experience for him. This was the first time he got to meet his fellow Troy since being drafted by the Steelers. And he said it was awesome. They took a picture together. He hurried up and sent it to his mom. And, Troy and his wife basically said, hey, if you ever need anything, not just as a fellow Steeler, but, both of Samoan heritage, let us know. So Fautanu was, I think, kind of geeking out a little bit at that whole situation. Not just Troy, but I mean, he grew up watching and rooting for Ben Roethlisberger, Hines Ward, Jerome Bettis, and all those guys too. And they were all on the field playing some flag football together.
And Logan Lee, 6th-round draft pick, he also, I believe, grew up a Steeler fan. So it's pretty cool to see these guys living the dream and getting.
Yeah, when he was drafted, he said he watched the Steel Curtain team. Oh. So I don't even none of those guys really were there. So Logan Lee might have been like, man, can we get Jack Ham and Jack Lambert in here? That's what I'm trying to see.
I'd love to see Jack Lambert do anything. I think he's in hiding, but still, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing. Now let's talk about the rookie class and your early impression of them. You saw that from rookie minicamp, obviously in week 1 of OTAs. Anything stand out? Just again, we're only gleaning what you can actually view as valuable. And so sometimes it might just be, these guys look like they belong, but the rookie class heavily invested in the offensive line. What have you seen so far from them?
Yeah, I mean, Fautanu and Frazier, kind of reserve judgment on them until we get to the aspect where, offensive linemen can kind of move people against their will. Yeah. You might not see that until training camp, but I will say, I mean, I think both guys are kind of being brought along, a little bit more slowly than fans would like or expect. I don't think the Steelers are, throwing them right out there and say, all right, your starters, go, let's see it. No, I mean, they've got incumbents. They've got Dan Moore still at left tackle. They've got Nate Herbig still, who has done some center stuff. So those guys still have to earn it, is basically what I'm saying. I mean, one of the very few instances in recent years of a rookie just kind of rocketing right into the starting lineup was Najee Harris back in 2021, because such a vacancy at that spot. And, just other factors, running backs, you generally can go right into the NFL and play right away. And he was so physically developed and mature that was all able to happen. And I'm not saying that Fautanu and especially Frazier won't be starters come week 1, but they've got to work their way up the ladder to get there. As far as guys who, they might not start, but they might still contribute in some way. I mean, Peyton Wilson, I think is going to be ready to have some sort of role in the defense, whether that's just, kind of playing the old Robert Spillane position of third downs, obvious passing situations, really focus and home in on that as your responsibility. I mean, he looks the part. Somebody asked Landon Roberts about him this week, and he's just like, man, he's really tall. So he is a physically impressive dude, which you knew. But again, you don't really grasp it until you see them in person. So, yeah, I mean, Wilson seems like he's going to be able to hit the ground running, and that's especially significant with Cole Holcomb trying to work his way back. I mean, I talked to him one day this week, wrote about it on postgazette.com. Very determined, very committed, vowing to play football again. But the fact that he's even kind of framing it that way, even just subconsciously, makes you wonder when he's going to be healthy, when he's going to be cleared to play. And anything you get from him might be house money in 2024.
Do we actually know, since you brought up Holcomb, do we actually know what the injury was? I mean, we assume he tore his ACL, but was it was it a multiple ligament injury?
So I think so. It was a very interesting conversation I had with Holcomb. He's from like the kind of throwback style of linebacker. Not much of a talker. A little bit snarling too in some ways. And, he didn't want to get into the specifics. He did say that he and Corey Trice have different injuries. And we know Trice's was an ACL tear. So I'm going to venture to assume, at risk of being, pounded into the dirt by Cole Holcomb, that it probably, and just everybody who watched that gruesome injury happen against the Titans probably goes beyond just your routine torn ACL. I'm thinking that's a more significant setback for him. And I mean, just when we've seen him at times, he's got that big, he had like a full leg brace on his left leg. So he's got a long road back, but he's been at OTAs participating as much as he can on the sideline. And we'll see if he's able to make an impact at all in 2024. But no, I don't know the exact nature of it. He did not want to discuss that.
I'm not surprised, but thank you for the update. That's a great update. And I think that, you brought up Corey Trice. Everyone gets so enamored with the rookie class and the new faces, and whether you're talking about free agents, sometimes people forget, well, what about the guys that are going into year 2? The guys that have been there, now they've done that for a year. And not to mention, they've had an offseason to actually rest. Some of these rookies, I don't think fans really grasp how they finish their college season, and let's assume they don't make the playoffs. They go right into training for the combine, and then they're getting ready maybe for a Senior Bowl or a Shrine Bowl or one of those all-star games. And then they're being thrust into rookie. It never stops. They have no time to break. So when you look at the second-year players, we're talking about the 2023 draft class. Anything show up for you? I did see that Joey Porter looked like he had put on some muscle, things like that. Have you seen anything about these second-year guys?
Porter is just carrying himself like somebody who's established now in the league. And I mean, he was ahead of the curve that way even last year, especially once we got to training camp. I mean, I think everybody probably remembers the viral one-on-one battles between him and George Pickens, and Joey not backing down. But this year, I mean, he seems well beyond his years. As I said, it's almost hard to remember that he's only a second-year guy and hasn't even been a starter for a full year just yet. But I mean, beyond him, everybody's sort of wondering what Trice is going to be able to provide. He's not fully cleared for contact yet. Said he will be by training camp. And, Darius Rush, not a 2023 draft pick of the Steelers, but he might as well be because of how early they claimed him and signed him to the active roster off of, the Chiefs practice squad. So those were kind of like 2 bonus draft picks for them this year. And I didn't expect them to take another outside corner high this year because of that. They did end up drafting Ryan Watts in the 6th round out of Texas, but I think they're looking at him more as a safety than another corner. So, I mean, Rush, I think has looked good 1 week in. Again, knock on wood, they haven't been doing much, but he looks like somebody who's got an inside track right now, at least over Trice, because he's fully healthy. And either way, I mean, one of those guys would have to knock off Dante Jackson, who came over from Carolina, and Deontay Johnson trade, because he's a grizzled vet of the NFL. He's only ever played for the Panthers, but he said he's always enjoyed watching the Steelers. He's had interest in them and vice versa in the past. Before he signed his most recent contract with Carolina, he was down to the Panthers and the Steelers. So he's wanted to be here for a while. They've clearly entertained the idea of having him here for a while. If he's got anything left in the tank, I think he's in pole position at the other corner spot to keep going back to that Tomlin term.
Yeah. Now I want to ask about three players from last year's draft class, and just early, you said, I thought you put it best when you said Joey Porter Jr. looks like he's been there, done that. I want to ask about Keanu Benton, Nick Herbig, and Darnell Washington. Anything stand out with those three guys that are different from this year compared to last year outside of the holy crap, I'm a rookie in the NFL?
Well, Benton and Washington, on opposite sides of the ball, play such a physical brand. I mean, that's really what they're bringing to the mix that I'm not seeing much to glean from OTAs. But Nick Herbig as an edge rusher, I mean, this is actually a great setting for him because, I mean, it's just all about speed. Nobody's really getting brought to the ground or anything. So you can only be so physical. And for him, as I'm not going to say he's a finesse pass rusher, but he's probably got the quickest get off of anybody on this team. Maybe you'd still go TJ Watt because he's just a freak of nature. But Herbig is, he's built different, physically, and that's how he's going to have to win in the NFL. And I was just talking to Broderick Jones about him on Thursday. They had a little back and forth, and they've been doing that because they came in together as rookies. But Broderick was just saying that it's always so good to match up against Herbig because what he has moves in his arsenal, but he's going to be so quick off the snap that even though you're towering over him as a 6'5", 320-pound tackle, he's so good at dipping under you, and you've also got to be ready out of your stance. Try not to false start, but also try to get your hands on him early. So I think Herbig could very well vault himself into that number 3 pass rusher role, and hopefully for the Steelers, you don't have to go out and make a Marcus Golden-esque move again like they did this time last year.
And then that Jeremiah Moon might tie into that equation as well.
Yeah, Moon was the kind of wild card or X factor. Kyron Johnson's another guy who sort of stuck on the roster at the end of last season, more so for special teams than anything. But yeah, I mean that's a spot where they could always kind of look at things and say, we need to feel better about our depth on the edge behind TJ and Alex Highsmith. But I think for right now, there's some intriguing candidates to be there even behind Herbig.
And when you think about those training camp matchups with the edge pass rushers going up against the tackles, I mean, you look at the investment they've put into some of these players, whether you're talking about Fa'u Tanu, Broderick Jones, going up against Nick Herbig, some of these pass rushers should be must-watch TV, so to speak, in training camp. I have to talk to you about the quarterback situation. I can't let you go without talking about the quarterbacks. You alluded to Russell Wilson earlier in the podcast about his work ethic. Some people have called it Antonio Brown-esque. No, not Antonio Brown filing for bankruptcy or Antonio Brown going off the deep end, but in terms of no one outworked Antonio Brown when he was the legit best wide receiver in the league. What have been your early takeaways, and what are your thoughts on the competition? We know the pole position has been talked about ad nauseum with Mike Tomlin and his verbiage. What's your take on the competition and how these guys look between Justin Fields and Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I really don't think there's going to be much of a competition. I think it's going to be like the 2022 offseason all over again, that Mitch Trubisky led wire to wire. And yes, Kenny Pickett, was a little different than Fields in this case, and that he had to overcome, Mason Rudolph. He had to kind of knock him down a peg to even be the number 2. But I'd be shocked if Wilson's not the starter week 1. I think everybody's sort of operating that way, but it's interesting. Like, one of the vibes I get, beyond just what they're doing on the field, but as far as, being around people in the locker room and, just seeing how they move and how players revolve around them, is I wouldn't be surprised if guys sort of look at Russ as like, he's the safety net. Like, he's the guy who's won a Super Bowl. We all grew up watching him for the most part. We all know what he's about, and he's going to be a leader. He'll wear the C on his chest and everything. And we know that he's got an NFL resume that's longer than anybody's here. But Fields is almost like the exciting one where that, like, I think guys kind of want to, like, you even see players leaning over a little bit to, like, see how he's looking. I mean, he's the one that's I think engaging a lot with guys, and everybody's intrigued and fascinated by him. I'm sure they watched him in college. He was top half of the first round pick. He had some extremely exciting highlights with the Bears. I don't think players from the other 31 teams are looking at the low lights as often as they're seeing the highest of highs that players put on tape around the league and their peers. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the dynamic that I'm seeing. I think if there's going to be any sort of shuffling or chance for Fields to make a push, it'll have to come once the games matter, and Russell Wilson's either helping the Steelers win or contributing, being a factor to them losing, and then maybe you'll see Fields get a look. But yeah, I mean it's I think people are walking on eggshells a little bit too, because it's sort of like, how do you frame this? How many times can you just say, man, we're here to compete? It's like, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? Like Fields, I thought, I give him credit. It was sort of interesting that he said on Tuesday he doesn't plan on sitting on the sideline all season. I mean, what else are you going to say? But yeah. I suppose he could have been like, I'm just learning from Russ, and whatever happens, happens. Like, no, I mean, he's obviously done it in the NFL. He's been a franchise quarterback. He's had the weight of the world on his shoulders in Chicago. So yeah, I mean, this is going to, last into September now as far as Wilson trying to be the number one, but knowing that you've got a very interesting and intriguing number two behind it.
So Russ is getting up there in age. Justin Fields obviously much younger, and he's got a cannon of an arm. How's Russ's arm still holding up? Does he still have all the throws?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it. He certainly still throws a good ball. He's one of those guys that is a little bit jarring when you start watching him a lot firsthand. He is very small. I mean, Broderick Jones said like the first day is like, I kind of paraphrasing, but like, I knew you were short, but like, man, do you take like a 15-step drop? How do you even do this at this level? So I think some people do kind of marvel at what he's been able to do at his sub 6 foot size to this point. I just think it's a natural thing to wonder, though. I mean, as you get up there in age and inevitably lose some of your athleticism and your mobility, how do you compensate for that size now? So that's going to be partially on Arthur Smith to scheme things up. That's going to be on his receivers to make plays. But yeah, I mean, I just don't see how Russ loses the job going into week one. Like how poorly can somebody really play in a training camp environment? How many reps are you really going to see him have in preseason? And even if he does look terrible, aren't you going to kind of write that off and say, we've got 11 seasons of stellar play, not so worried about one summer of up and down play with a bunch of new guys?
It would almost take an injury. We hope that doesn't happen, but it would almost take injury to have that take place. I want to ask you quickly, just your own personal thoughts on the Kenny Pickett situation that took place, that saw him getting sent to Philadelphia for that 3rd round draft pick that turned into Peyton Wilson. Were you surprised that how everything went down? I mean, it seemed like it happened pretty quick. I'm not here to talk about what went down. Like, there's so many different reports out there. Really don't care anymore, but just in curiosity, what was your take on the Kenny Pickett situation?
Yeah, one thing that I just kept coming back to, and I guess I'll keep coming back to, is that somebody who covered Kenny at Pitt, and then, even once I moved across the hall at the Steelers, still around him a lot, I really just figured I wasn't super confident that his Steelers career was going to work out and that he was going to lead them to great heights. But I just figured when it ended, it wasn't going to go poorly because of any sort of drama or off-field distractions or acrimonious dealings between the two sides. And yet that's kind of, that ended up being a big part of it. Was it mostly an on-field decision from the Steelers? Yeah, at least to bring in Russ, I think so. But clearly there was some animosity that had been harbored or maybe built up over time, or just quickly, turned into ill will between those two that Kenny wanted out as quickly as he did. So, I mean, it's business. It's the reality of the NFL. Kenny wanted to do what he thought was best for him. Steelers clearly thought bringing in Russell Wilson was best for them. And, you go your separate ways. I think more than anything, there is a sadness element to it when you think of Pitt fans who were so pumped to see him come over to the Steelers. I mean, you think of 10-year-old kids who probably had a Kenny Pickett Pitt jersey, and the first thing they bought was a Kenny Pickett Steelers jersey when he got drafted by them a couple years ago. I mean, these are hard lessons that you learn as a sports fan. And, it's a bummer that it ended, not just after 2 years, but it ended with so much kind of mudslinging between both sides. I guess that's society writ large these days, and it trickles down to football stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to kind of see if anybody ever circles back on that, the involved parties. I don't think the Steelers would, but what will Kenny eventually say about this down the road, and what exactly will he say as far as feeling like he didn't want to be here anymore? But either way, it's ancient history. We'll see if he ever gets another crack at being a starter in the league. There's worse guys to sit behind than Jalen Hurts, and the physical brand of quarterback that he plays. I mean, he can go down at any time because he's always doing the tush push and trying to extend plays. So we'll see if Kenny's back in the spotlight at any point. If he does, how he fares. But yeah, that was an odd, strange 2-year tenure of Steelers history, and one that I don't know that it set the organization back, but certainly didn't help it move forward at all.
That's true. Well put. Last question for you before I let you go. Just what are your overall thoughts on this 2024 Steelers, including the fact that we now know the schedule, which is not simple. We knew the opponents, but obviously it is what it is. What's your take on the 2024 Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this because it sounds so boring, but it's just been so many years of I don't want to use the term mediocrity, because that means average, basically. And, they've been above average for most of these seasons. But I'll just say, until I see otherwise, and until they go out and prove they can be something different, I'm going to just keep expecting 9-8, 10-7, either barely squeak into or narrowly miss the playoffs. I mean, it just feels like that's the groove they're in, for lack of a better term. And, it's better than losing, I guess. But in the grand scheme of things, you can make the compelling case that sometimes it does help your organization to bottom out, rip the Band-Aid off, rebuild from the ground up, use some draft capital to either find a superstar or amass a lot of talent. I mean, they've got talent, but it's just tough relative to the rest of this conference, and specifically the division. I still think the AFC North is the toughest in the NFL. So, I mean, it's almost like I'd feel significantly different about the Steelers if they were in the NFC versus the AFC, but they have to go to bed every night knowing who's on their schedule and who their closest opponents are in their twice a year matchups. So you've got to find some way to get over on them, or zig when they zag, and maybe find a different way to win if you don't have the Joe Burrows and Lamar Jacksons of the world.
That's well said. I agree with you. All right. I want to give you an opportunity to plug whatever you're doing, obviously, for the Post-Gazette and anywhere else, social media handles, all that fun stuff. Go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, so post-gazette.com, we've got all our Steelers content there. I do a chat every Monday, not Memorial Day, but most Mondays, chat usually at 2 p.m., usually Thursday, mailbags, and we've got our Post-Gazette YouTube channel as well. Not hard to find if you search that. And if you're still roaming about Twitter, and it's kind of an ugly place at times now, but I'm still on there at Brian Batko. I just don't engage as often now because of what that site's become. But yeah, thanks to everybody for following our stuff at the PG, and appreciate you having me on, Jeff.
No problem, Brian. Thank you as always. Maybe we'll talk before the season starts, but take it easy. Enjoy your holiday.
Sounds good. See ya.